and welcome to Werewolf the podcast. This is episode 103 and we're still on the Viking theme, so I hope you like Vikings. If you don't like Vikings, then there's something wrong with you, because Vikings are really cool. Vikings and werewolves, yeah. Sorry. Anyway, let's carry on. Thanks to all those downloading this thing on whatever platform you are downloading it on. There are loads of them now. There's like Spotify's, that seems a favourite, McApple Podcasts, Spodchaser, and Deezer. Deezer doesn't really sound like a podcast platform, does it? It sounds like the Eighth Dwarf, who was a gangster rapper in the modern woke world of, or version of, Sleeping Beauty. No, we're not allowed to call it Sleeping Beauty, are we? Sleeping. We are all beautiful in our own way, and the 7 people of much smaller than average height. It's not really got the same ring to it, has it? Oh, wait a minute, I'm being stupid. It's not Sleeping Beauty, is it? It's Snow White. Oh, shit. Not going there. I was sad when looking at the Pod Friends platform. They didn't want to be my friend at all. They ignored my request to go to the cinema, and I would have bought the popcorn too. They were just another podcast platform pretending to be my friend so they could use me for its own advertising. Sorry, it just hurts at times. Thanks to those who have followed the show and rated it and stuff. If you go on your podcast platform of choice and follow me and review me and stuff, that would be great. You can also get notifications of when the show comes out, and all that really helps me. Yeah, I don't make any money at this, but it's fun. Those people who do that are the best. No, you are. No, you are. Stop it. You're amazing. What are you doing Friday night? The Cineplex is E.T. on rerun. No? Oh, okay. So let us continue with Fen's Viking adventures. Hopefully you've listened to the last episode with him and the one before that, and we've met his Viking soul bearer, Thorstein, and we've learnt about him combining with him. We also learn why he's now called Fenrir, as in the Fenrir of Norse mythology. You know, the big fuck-off giant black fuck-off wolf. If you don't, then go back and listen to the previous 2 episodes at least. Then you'll know what you do and know what you do not. How can you know what you do not know? That was a stupid sentence. Sorry. We will go into how Thorstein became one of the most famous Vikings we have never heard of, and how he gained power. From this start, he became a king in the Norse realm for more than a century. He took on a godlike status, and how his people loved him for what he brought them. Successes, riches, yeah. Unlike in our times, the Norse could happily accept that someone could share a creature's soul. 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, you would have been thought of being crazy, or we would have said mental as a kid. These days, I'm not sure what's going on, to be honest. Can you identify as an animal with an animal soul? Excuse me while I Google that. Oh, okay, otherkin. Otherkin are a subculture of people who identify not entirely as human. Some otherkin believe their identity derives from reincarnation, a non-human soul ancestry, symbolism, or metaphor. Others attribute it to unusual psychology and do not hold spiritual beliefs. Categories of otherkin include fiction kin, those who identify as fictional characters; concept kin, who identify as abstract concepts; weatherkin, who identify as weather systems; and many other obscure categories. Joseph P. Laycock, assistant professor of religion studies at Texas State University, considers otherkin beliefs to have a religious dimension, but asserts that the argument that otherkin identify claims conform to a substantive definition of religion is problematic. He could use good words, couldn't he? Many otherkin themselves reject the notion that being otherkin is a religious belief. A controversial but frequently made analogy is gender dysphoria, leading to the terms transspecies or transspeciesism and species dysphoria. Okay. It mentions furries. No. Some of the great sagas told of gods and men who could change themselves into animals at will. Look at Loki and Odin. They did a lot of lying, cheating, and seducing as other creatures. Seducing as an animal is a bit weird. Now, what young maid would not be attracted to a giant bull? Let's not go any further because we don't look fondly on bestiality these days, do we? God. However, the Vikings seem to think it was okay. Thorstein met Fen one afternoon while fishing and they got on like a house on fire. Houses on fire would be part of their combined futures. Well, houses, villages, towns, cities, countries on fire. Let's say that instead of houses, countries on fire. Houses are just a tiny part of what Thorstein helped put to the torch. Thorstein had already been recognised a great warrior by the age of 14. Bandits had attacked his farmstead while his father was away at the market. This shit would happen a lot in the bad old days of the Norse world. The thieves would see the man had left his home and think they would have easy pickings. So, having said all that, let's have Fenrir continue the story. The 6 men had wandered into the homestead that afternoon and demanded that the goats and anything of value should be theirs. They were the lowest of the low in Ostman society. They were outlaws, people shunned from the community, outcasts for doing something unworthy and branded on the forehead for all to see that they'd been cast out of decent society. Well, decent by Norseman's definition of that thing. Even slaves could kill them on sight. Yeah, even slaves. Thorstein, me and Thorstein's little brother Eric had been tending the herds in field, but came running on hearing the men entering the farmstead and threatening their mother. She was a proud Viking woman, looking the scum over with their baby sister in her arms, like the men were dirt. A shield maiden in her youth, she eyed them to see if she could take them. A worthy fight in the eyes of the gods, but the children would be alone on her death, and that was not a thing she could allow. Thorstein and I jogged up to the men, with Eric skipping and running behind. The boys were laughing and giggling in a way they should not have been. Eric was only 6 summers and knew and accepted the wolf that Thorstein and I could become without any question. I'd become a regular part of the family life. The parents smiled at little Thorstein's invisible wolf friend, but they could see that the boy was different and stronger than others. They could see the changes I'd brought and had met me in both forms that I could become. They did not fear me. I was a sign that the gods had blessed their son. They saw it as a wonderful thing, and our hunting in our forms had fed them well on many occasions. As a bonus, the local wolf pack would have nothing to do with any animals on their farm or them. Fenrir and Thorstein were loved as a pair in this family. Anyway, back to the story. Thorstein wandered up to the men pretty cocksure of himself and stood with his hands on his hips. He was a little poser. Fenrir and me, was in tow, and I sat behind the boy showing a keen interest in what was happening. I knew this would be a crucial moment where Thorstein would gain some notoriety. I would also get to fuck some folk up, which is one of my favourite things to do. To do people is definitely number 2 of my favourite things to do. Buffy, my favourite TV show, would take a few centuries before its release, so I suppose killing humans was my number 1 favourite thing to do at this time. Buffy. Thorstein was 12, although he looked older and had no weapons. Well, I suppose I was his weapon, and I was invisible to these cunts, so what they saw was a young boy and no threat. There was no reason for this child to be so confident. He should have been pooing his pants, a crying ball of scared kid. Not our little Thorstein. He was excited about this, his energy transferring to me. He had no fear at all. He was fucking awesome. He started shouting at the men, trying to get their attention. One of the only issues with Thorstein was his need for attention. But we all have our flaws, don't we? Well, we do. Do I? Oh yeah, I like Buffy, a programme aimed at teenage nerds. The dirty, stinky men were not giving the boys any attention at all. Why would they be bothered by the boys? They were only children, just victims for later enjoyment. "Hey, you, ugly! You! Yeah, you, ugly! Go away now, or I will kill all of you!" Thorstein shouted at them. I really needed to expand his vocabulary into a better range of swear words. I mentally put it on my list of things to do. He was a brutal killer, but his insult game was nowhere near the same level. The leader now turned to look at the threat given, and then his men. They all smiled and laughed at the unarmed youngster, ignoring him to continue their conversation with the mother. "You are on your own, woman. You bring us what we wish. You give us what we wish, and you may survive this. Your children may survive this," said the hideous, lascivious leader. Thorstein's mother was tough. Doesn't sound right. But after Pulp Fiction, I would call her a bad motherfucker, and meant that as a compliment. Thorstein's mother was a bad motherfucker. Well, that bad motherfucker shushed her baby, giving it a rhythmic rock to settle it, and once she was happy with that swaddled baby, she smiled at the men and said confidently,
"I would listen to my son if I were you. Otherwise, he'll kill you for your lack of manners."
The men laughed in her face, and the boss turned to the boy. "Come then, boy, kill us. We are afeard that you are here. We are armed and 6, so we will struggle to overcome such odds with a puppy like you." Puppy? Did he have a clue as to Thorstein's real self? Nah, it's just a convenient coincidence. "What will you use to fight? Your hands and your teeth?" he asked the boy. I laughed in Thorstein's head. He's got it. Claws and teeth and overwhelming strength and speed. The dumb man has got it. Thorstein laughed in response to my wit and pointed at the man and looked at his brother. "They know, brother. They know I will rip them to pieces with bloody teeth and sharpened claws." Little Eric joined in with the merriment as Thorstein turned to the men. "Yep, I really had to up his insult game. Can you develop wit and banter? The Vikings, though, were not renowned for it, to be honest." "I am going to rip your ugly face from your head and make you eat it to shut you up," Thorstein announced yet again, taking up a stance somewhat reminiscent of Peter Pan in the original cartoon version. Not that fucking Wendy shit Disney just spewed forth. Have you ever read Peter Pan? What the fuck was J.M. Barrie on? The man was fucked in the head. Are you ready for this? The fairies tried not to wake sleeping Peter as they wandered back from their late-night orgy. Is a line from that famous children's book. What? That's not in Disney. This was not how it was supposed to go. The leader, Hulf, was not expecting any kind of resistance. They'd watched the farm to see the farmer and the 2 male labourers leave. This was supposed to be easy. He was now confused and a bit drunk, a bad mixture to have combined to sound threatening and intelligent. Yes, Ulf was a bit too drunk and wobbly on his feet. Drool ran from the corner of his mouth. He was a big man by any standard, with a toothless mouth framed by a grey and dark, dirty beard. Well, he did have one tooth, a brown stub that drew your attention every time you looked at it. Ugh, what a face. He genuinely looked like he'd been eating shit. Maybe he had. What's that kink called? Nope, sorry, back to the story. The skin of Ulf's face was red and covered in blotches and boils. His body was dirtied and twisted in the shoulders. But Ulf was drunk and ready to show off to the others, even if that involved abusing children. He did look like he would rather enjoy abusing children, though. Move on, Fen, for fuck's sake. Remember, we try and make these podcasts less than an hour long. Do the audience a favour and get on with it. Sorry, Will. I had Coach Thorstein pointing out the gang members, their strengths and mainly their weaknesses. There weren't many strengths. And how to play with them? They were cowards, not wanting a fight, and this would be a fight. Well, it won't be a fight, It would be a massacre that I could use to teach the young pups some lessons, much like you would give weak and injured prey to the pack's pups to let them learn. The group of outlaws had a mix of weapons. Some were sharp and some just clubs and sticks of wood. This was going to be fun. Eric was dancing on the spot and clapping his little hands at the thought of the coming confrontation. He was excited to see his big brother transform and rip these idiots apart. Their mother spoke again to Hulf.
Can you think why the man left this place unguarded? They are not stupid. They left it unguarded because of...
She motioned to the boys.
Thorstein here. I would run, you fools. Not that it'll do you any good. You're all dead.
She laughed, gave them a mocking half-smile and took her focus back to the baby in her arms. She was not behaving how she should at this juncture. She was going to get raped and shit. Why was she not? Hulf was unsure now, looking at the group of men with him. Well, not men as the Vikings knew them. All were craven outcasts. He knew they were cowards and would likely run at the first sign of any actual difficulty. He would need to give them some confidence. These losers required inspiration. In fact, he fucking needed some inspiration. This weren't going well. He would do his best. After I fuck your mother, boy, I will fuck your brother and the baby in front of you, then fuck you to death with this. He showed Thorstein a broken spear, a short cracked shaft with a steel tip. His compatriots did a dutiful laugh at the display of such wit. Thorstein stopped smiling, and he set himself. He was now right pissed off. Hulf had fucked up. One of the failings of Thorstein was his lack of a sense of humour, and it went both ways. He could not cast decent insults, and he could not take any insults. He just got really annoyed. We would need to work on that. The outlaw saw something then that he was not expecting. He saw a genuine anger in the boy and felt that wash over him. Even in his half-pissed state, half-hammered state for our international listeners, Hulf felt frightened. And it was at this time that Hulf realised that he'd fucked up. Something about the boy's demeanour was very wrong. A flashing light and an alarm went off in his brain's amygdala. That tiny bit of his mind that was left recognised that there was something to fear in this boy. Unfortunately for the man, the alcohol bubbling through his blood dulled that section of his brain, so instead of apologising for disturbing the nice family and leaving them to the day, maybe adding the offer to help a little with light chores for the trouble before they went, he ignored that pinging part of his person and ploughed on. "I will give you an opportunity to walk away from this," the boy said. "You can walk away and no more will be said. I will not even mention this to my father. If you stay, I will tear you to strips with my teeth and my claws. I will then take those scraps and feed them to the crows, if they lower themselves to eat your foul flesh. I even think the maggots would turn their noses up at your rottenness," the boy explained to the man. "Good one, Thorstein, good one," yelled little Eric as he poked his tongue out of the group of men and thumbed his nose in conjunction with the tongue, the equivalent of giving the middle finger back in those days. The man focused on the key words in this monologue and carefully tried to deconstruct the sentence in his drunken haze. I could smell him thinking. That's never good when you can smell someone thinking. "Claws?" he said, removing his headgear and scratching his balding pate whilst looking at the other men. Maybe Ulf was not so stupid. He knew that little boys do not have claws. He laughed then in the general direction of his men and expected a dutiful laugh in return, but they just stared at where the boy stood. Nervous, and with some inner part of himself knowing that this would not be good in any way, Hulf turned back to where the boy had stood. There was now a massive, wolf-like man where there had once been a boy. Its pelt was blacker than the night. It was pure darkness, and it stole light from the sky. It stared at him, intrigued. It had insolence. The man was being given its sole interest, which was more than discomforting for poor Hulf. Its eyes were pits of fire, and it smiled in an over-toothy grin that made the amygdala part of his brain want to get the fuck out of this idiot's head. If a wolf's head could smile, it smiled. The fucking thing smiled, and that smile was teeth. Big, sharp teeth. Teeth like knives. Teeth that were really toothy and teeth-like. The type of teeth that you could imagine would be really good at ripping things apart in a rippy, toothy sort of way. Ulf shook his head, trying to get some clarity on the situation. Nope, it didn't switch off the alarms. This could not be. He closed his eyes, blinking and rubbing them with the grimy backs of his hands. Nope, not having it. What the veritable fuck was going on? The smaller boy could hardly stand as the laughter racked his body. He leant on the wolfsman's leg for support as though it was the most normal thing to do. The black beast rested his hand on the child's head and ruffled his hair, keeping him from falling to the ground. Eric enjoyed the care of the werewolf, and getting control of himself, and after wiping the tears away from his eyes, wagged a finger at Hulf. "Oh, you're in trouble now, Mr. Man. Wolfie Fenrir comes for you," said the little boy. The woman spoke again, and the man turned to her, unwilling to believe what he saw. What had been in that ale? What the fuck had he drunk? Had it been off? He shook his head and made a great effort to listen to the woman.
"I did tell you that he would kill you. He is often not nice enough to give you chances, but he does not like to kill in front of his family. He thinks of it as distasteful,"
she whispered, covering her mouth with the back of her hand before getting back to rocking the baby in her arms and smiling at the big man.
"It seems you had your chance. Travel well to the next world. Maybe if you fight well, Odin will welcome you," she
said, as she shrugged at Hulf, turning her back to the group and wandering back into the house, coochie cooing the child in her arms. "Huh?" said the boss, jaw dropping as he turned again to the wolfman. It was somehow right here, right here, right in his face. Hulf had no idea it had got so close so quickly. He'd heard nothing, and now its snout was an inch from his own as it hunched down to get eye to eye with the outlaw. Its breath was moist and smelt of death. A puddle started to form at Hulf's left boot as piss trickled down his leg. Hulf didn't notice the piss. He only noticed the creature's head, which filled his world. Ulf wanted to run. Oh, how he wanted to run, but his legs would not allow him. His arms simply dropped to his side and he let the weapons he held drop from his hands. His body was frozen. The fucking amygdala was getting its own back by choosing this F, freeze, out of the 3 Fs it could have fucking chosen. Ulf wasn't ready for this. Who was ever ready for something like this? He had done bad things, and now the gods had asked for the blood price he owed. This was the day. The tapestry of the Norns was the end for this story. The wolf's head sniffed him up and down as it stepped back to view the whole of him. Ulf did not move from that puddle, which was being quickly soaked up by the dry ground. He closed his eyes and prayed. He prayed that someone was listening and that this was one of those jokes he'd heard of in sagas. He would open his eyes and it would be the little boy again, and he would have learnt an important life lesson and would turn over a new leaf and become a good person from then on. He reopened his eyes. Nope. The fucking thing was still there. It was still fucking there. For a moment, his thoughts, booze-addled thoughts, became clear. This was his chance to show Drenger, to die an honourable death. He couldn't beat this creature, he already knew it, but if he showed bravery at the end, maybe the gods would forgive his past cowardice and indiscretions and allow him into Odin's hall. He could do it. He could have a great end. His story would be told of this fight. The wolf sniffed again. No, he couldn't move. His body was rigid. He would die pathetically and poorly. Thorstein and I reached forward with a clawed hand. We together, as the werewolf, waited for the man to give fight. But all the man did was watch the claw get closer to his face as his eyes went back to those of the beast. A huge palm landed on the top of Ulf's head. The paw's claws latched deep into the flesh on the back of his skull, and he started to scream as the scalp was torn off from the back of his head towards his face. If I had to describe the process as a visual metaphor, this would be similar to opening the ring tab of a can of Coke. Oh wait, sorry, I need to be fair to other brands. Opening the ring tab to a carbonated beverage of your choice. Ulf couldn't move. He just felt the skin wrenched slowly from the bone. He felt the tearing throughout his body, and most of all, he felt the pain. We continued tearing at the scalp until the forehead peeled away from the front of the skull. Blood was now running, and it ran into the man's open eyes and mouth, creating bubbles as he breathed and screamed. It took us a couple of big jerks to peel it past the eye orbits, and then Ulf's body went limp. I held him solidly by the neck to hold him up to continue my work. As the strip of flesh lengthened, it was easier to tear away. It was removed from his nose and his lips easily. Well, easily for us. Not for Ulf. Not so easy. The screaming intensified now as I was ripping it away. Still, we muffled it as we gathered the flayed skin and pushed it into the screaming mouth while laughing together inside our head. The flesh gag muffled the noise of the crying man. Eric was loving it. Ulf's body and brain were just all about pain. He felt the skin being torn from his head, and then all went black as he started his journey to meet hell. Ah, shit. It was so disappointingly dead already. So we cast the corpse aside to the ground and showed some distaste for the dead man. Eric was so excited now he was jumping up and down and cheering. "You fed him his face! You fed him his face!" The other men had already begun to run from the horror. They'd cast aside all they could and were trying to get some distance between themselves and the beast. Thorstein's mum reappeared at the door. The wolf looked at her. A dutiful son. He wanted his mother's permission to go after his victims. Her face showed pride in what her boy was and his capabilities. She nodded her approval as he set off on the chase. Eric was cheering and punching the air. The outlaws didn't get far before they were individually brought down and savagely injured. They would be killed in time. They would be killed in Thorstein's time. He would get to have fun with them and play with them in many cruel ways. They weren't humans, these. They would not sit with Odin. They would limp to hell and admit their pathetic natures to her. Thanks for listening. If you want to join me on any social media, that would be great. We have Facebook groups and Twitter and Instagram and no, that's it. Please follow me. On your podcast platform, please follow, review, get notifications, do everything like that. That would be awesome. You wonderful people. I don't ask you very much for this, so well, in fact, I'm just impressed you listen. But apart from that, thank you very much. Love you very much all very dearly. Bye.